Is everybody ready? This is a 2-minute warning.
Maybe I'll just verify my audio is working.
5 by 5. Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Ms. Silbaugh, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, Chair Hart, we do have a quorum participating in the meeting. Today is yourself as chair, Vice Chair Lobby, Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, Commissioners Rouse, Conklin, and Higgins and DeBrule. And Commissioners Higgins and DeBrule are alternates, and they will be non-voting today.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Now we will turn to our safety message from Emergency Management Specialist Richard David. Mr. David?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The National Safety Council marks April as Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Being attentive and alert can help prevent crashes. Put your phone down. It can wait. Please be mindful of other distractions such as eating, drinking, adjusting the radio or other systems, or even interacting with passengers. Focus on your task can improve safety for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our previous meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of March 5th, 2024 meeting were posted for review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? I move approval of the March 5th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Lobby has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any
Yay.
opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair, the vote 5 in approval. Therefore, approve the minutes has passed as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. We provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings. To ensure we recognize all who wish to speak, we provided an opportunity for those who have joined the Zoom meeting to sign up in the chat box. If you wish to speak but did not sign in, please do so now. I would also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels, or by email. Ms. Miner, do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to speak today?
Chair Hart, sorry, this is Max Smith. Ms. Miner is not here, but no, we have no one who has signed up to speak. I see no hands or no information in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Max. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities and the actions that we take on a daily basis to help ensure that Metro Rail upholds its safety commitments and strives to continuously improve the safety of its system. Metro Rail provided responses within the 30-day deadline required by our train operator certification order. The WMSC staff reviewed this response and provided feedback. I thank the WMSC staff for this effective oversight work, and I also thank Metro Rail for its efforts since our order to take first steps towards complying with its safety requirements that it has developed to provide for the safety of Metro Rail riders and workers. Later in this meeting, we will discuss updates on other oversight activities, including those related to audits, inspections, investigations, and oversight of Metro Rail safety certification. I want to thank the WMSC staff for their ongoing oversight work on behalf of the region across Metro Rail subject areas. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks for the meeting today?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. I do have updates on several areas of our ongoing oversight work. I'll start with our February 28th order that you were just talking about on Metro Rail's noncompliance with its train operator certification requirements. We received Metro Rail's first required submissions in response to the order within the required timeframe, and this includes the results of Metro Rail's review of its certification records and the proposed corrective action plans to address the two findings. Metro Rail identified more than 600 employees that it had designated as certified train operators who did not meet Metro Rail's written requirements for certification. This further validates the need for the order that we issued. Metro Rail's review identified 18 employees that it determined required immediate certification to continue in their roles, and those employees were taken out of service pending that certification. And Metro Rail reported that some of these 18 have now been properly certified. We're continuing to evaluate the materials provided, and we will respond with additional direction to Metro Rail. As you know, we regularly conduct inspections of the WMATA rail system, and when these inspections identify safety issues requiring correction, we communicate these to Metro Rail. Our program standard requires Metro Rail to respond with plans to address the issue. Some recent examples of safety improvements that Metro Rail made due to our inspections include protecting passengers by fixing pinch points on an escalator at Greenbelt Station, Metro Rail communicating to its personnel about the importance of personal protective equipment and of roadway job safety briefings, and of following automatic train control maintenance procedures, and Metro Rail removing obstructions from emergency egress and refuge areas at Forest Glen Station. Our inspectors also identified on March 11th, 2024, that a track crew heading to a work zone near Metro Center was about to work around electrified third rail with electrical safety gloves that had expired more than 2 years ago. This would have presented an unsafe risk of shock or electrocution. The WMSC identified this worker safety issue, and the Metro Rail crew stopped work. As a result, Metro Rail issued a notice to its employees about the important role that electrical safety gloves play, and also how to procure such gloves if needed. These examples demonstrate the wide range of our safety impact, from worker safety to the safety of everyday riders and first responders. Turning to safety event investigations, we are reviewing a worker injury in the Falls Church rail yard that occurred on March 8. This injury occurred while workers were conducting a switch inspection. The equipment operated unexpectedly, and a worker's hand was injured. The investigations into the February 15th evacuation at Eastern Market Station and the September 29th derailment near Reagan National Airport are progressing, and we'll have some details about those later in the meeting. I also want to note that we are investigating a fatality that occurred last night at about 11 p.m. near Stadium Armory Station. That event will also be the subject of a final report that'll come forward to the commissioners when it's complete. We transmitted a draft of our latest railcar audit to Metro Rail for its 30-day review. The roadway worker protection draft audit is being developed. And regarding our fitness for duty and occupational health audit, Metro Rail has not provided all the required information, and Mr. Raddick will provide an update later in the meeting. We continue to oversee Metro Rail's progress on the 7000 series railcar return to service. The first railcars with new wheel sets assembled to the new specifications that align with industry standards for cars of similar weights, have now operated more than 20,000 miles. And this is a threshold set by Metrorail's engineering test plan under our oversight to conduct additional evaluation of a sample of these wheel sets. This evaluation began last week. Mr. Lopez of our staff observed Metrorail's activities, examining the first selected wheels and axles for cracks and other damage after disassembly. The work evaluating each of these axles selected under the test plan is continuing through later this month. Regarding the NTSB derailment investigation, the WMSC provided our response to safety recommendation R2329 to the NTSB last month. We provided information about our ongoing oversight of Metrorail, including our January 17th order, and asked the NTSB to classify this recommendation to us as open, acceptable response. We continue to oversee Metrorail's safety certification of automatic door operation and automatic train operation, and last month we provided our concurrence that Metrorail had met its safety certification requirements to begin conducting train operator automatic door operation certification in passenger service on all lines. We expect to observe certification on the blue, yellow, green, orange, and silver lines, and Metrorail has told us this will take several months once it begins in earnest. Regarding automatic train operation, Metrorail is developing its continuing to, well, I guess I should say really, we continue to communicate on the importance of test plans and test cases and of developing these engineering documents well in advance of any future testing. We provided the draft annual program standard revision to Metrorail for its comment period, and this is our document that lays out expectations and requirements for Metrorail. Any comments that Metrorail may provide by the deadline later this month will be carefully considered, as always. The commissioners will consider the program standard revision at an upcoming public meeting. I'll note that the WMSC met our annual reporting requirement to the FTA by submitting our data through their State Safety Oversight Reporting Tool, or SSOR, on March 14th, which was prior to the annual deadline. And we are currently developing the narrative annual reports on Metrorail safety and WMSC operations required under our compact that are based on the data we submitted to the FTA. These will be presented for your consideration at a future public meeting. Finally, the WMSC budget process remains on track. The Finance and Operations Committee is scheduled to meet later this month, and we expect commissioners to consider the final fiscal year 2025 budget at the May 14th public meeting. This is the budget for the WMSC fiscal year that begins on July 1st. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions for any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer? I have one question, and that is for those who are not necessarily so familiar with the NTSB process, what's the significance of the open acceptable response that they gave us? What does that mean?
That would just be the anticipated next step in acknowledging our communication on the safety recommendation. When the NTSB issues a safety recommendation, they place it in a status called a waiting response, just waiting for some acknowledgement by the recipient that they've received the recommendation and hopefully intend to take the recommended actions. That's what we communicated to them, and that we were already, in fact, taking some of the recommended actions, and consequently we asked for them to change the status from awaiting reply to acceptable reply.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
Chair Hart, I had a question regarding the operator certification and whether Metrorail provided any information about how to differentiate between the 18 and the remaining of the 600 that were able to remain in service.
Yes,
please, Commissioner Conklin. Thank you.
Yes, they did. They provided quite a lot of numerical information, and we worked very hard to understand that and have believe that we now understand the information that they provided and all of the breakdowns and information that they gave us. I just received a little bit of information on that, quite literally in the run-up to this meeting, and we will continue to digest that and provide some feedback to Metro Rail. We have not yet provided feedback to Metro Rail because we wanted to ensure that we absolutely understood what we had received from them first.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, and thank you for the question. Commissioner Conklin, any questions from any of the other commissioners?
I have my hand raised.
Yes, please.
David, you mentioned expiration dates on electrical gloves. I was just wondering, is there any type of safety protection clothing checkoff list that they have where they can periodically go in to see if the items that they are using have expired? Or is there like a checklist where they would, or they are issued every year things that expire?
I don't know of a specific checklist for that. Many items don't expire and are just to be replaced on condition, but there are a few items, and gloves and hard hats come to mind that do frequently have specific expiration dates that really ought to be verified every time they're used. But your question about a checklist is a good one. Over the years, we have noted Metro Rail using expired items of a variety of kinds, protective equipment and other equipment. So it's kind of an ongoing issue that we look for as a result of having seen it over the years. But the idea of a checklist is certainly something I'll take back to the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar-Dyke. Any other questions for Dr. Meyer? Okay, seeing none, I will now move on to our next item, which is audits with an update from Deputy Chief Operating Officer Davis Raddick. Mr. Raddick?
Thank you, Chair Hart. We are currently working on our audit of Metro Rail's fitness for duty and occupational health programs. The audit schedule that we most recently shared with Metro Rail in November provided for this audit to be ongoing now. In accordance with this schedule, we provided the formal notification letter and initial document request to Metro Rail in February, with the documents due to us 30 days later, which is our normal practice. However, in an email near the end of that 30 days, Metro Rail expressed concerns to WMSC staff about what Metro Rail described as the scope and burden of this audit. Metro Rail just stated it would not provide documents necessary to conduct the safety audit related to Metro Rail's occupational health and drug and alcohol programs. The WMSC provided a response and follow-up to Metro Rail regarding our authority and responsibility to carry out this important safety oversight work. Worker safety is an area where we have regularly identified and ensured Metro Rail corrects safety items as part of our inspections, audits, and investigations. Metro Rail subsequently reiterated that it would not provide documents regarding occupational health, drug and alcohol testing, or any further documents related to the safety hazard of elevated levels of lead that Metro Rail and the WMSC have been interacting about regularly since October. Metro Rail questioned the WMSC's authority that is provided by the WMSC compact. WMSC leadership then had direct conversations on this issue with Metro Rail leadership. In each of those conversations, Metro Rail reiterated that it would not provide the documents. In a written vote that ended March 29th, the WMSC commissioners authorized the issuance of subpoenas during the pendency of this audit. Yesterday, the WMSC issued a subpoena for the materials that Metro Rail has not provided. These materials are similar documents to those that we have requested and received as part of our other safety audits of Metro Rail. Following Metro Rail's refusal to provide all necessary documents for the fitness for duty and occupational health audit, Metro Rail unilaterally canceled planned follow-up meetings between Metro Rail and the WMSC on the lead hazard and other occupational safety and health issues, removed the discussion of Metro Rail's safety risk management of the lead hazard from other meeting agendas, and stated it would pause discussion on the issue. The WMSC has continued to follow up. Moving to other audit updates. On April 1st, we transmitted the draft report of our audit of Metro Rail's revenue vehicles or railcar program. This is part of our ongoing second triennial cycle of audits. And as with each audit report, Metrorail has a 30-day review period. The WMSC incorporates any additional information as warranted based on the comments received. We will then issue a final report. The scope of this audit included Metrorail's maintenance and engineering practices related to rail cars, those vehicles that are designed to carry customers, and the audit also included associated shop equipment. This audit assessed inspection, maintenance, and engineering practices and procedures and associated training for purposes of compliance with applicable plans, policies, regulations, and industry best practices. The WMSC is currently developing the draft report for the roadway or wayside worker protection program audit. We are also in the planning stages for our emergency management and fire and life safety programs audit. We expect this audit to include such items such as emergency preparedness and response, egress, and tunnel lighting. Each audit draws on items identified in safety event investigations, inspections, and other oversight activities. These audits cover all aspects of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan over a 3-year period and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. We take steps to ensure Metrorail personnel feel free to speak openly and transparently with us during each interaction, as this leads to the greatest opportunity for accurate and meaningful recognition of positive practices or areas for improvement. During each audit, we communicate safety issues identified during on-site activities to Metrorail personnel. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Raddick?
I have one question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
Mr. Raddick, I just wanted to confirm that you said Metrorail unilaterally canceled planned follow-up meetings between Metrorail and WMSC on the lead hazard and other occupational safety and health issues, and removed the discussion of Metrorail's safety risk management of the lead hazards from other meeting agendas. This all occurred before any subpoena was issued. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Raddick? Okay, seeing none, we will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans with an update from Ms. Ashley Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Since the last public meeting, we have closed 7 CAPs. Metrorail is also developing several other new CAPs to address recent findings and recommendations. The CAP development, implementation, and closure process is specified in our program standard. For CAP proposals, the program standard sets timelines for Metrorail's initial development and the WMSC's review of that proposal and determination of whether to approve the CAP or offer feedback for revision. If revisions are required, the program standard specifies the timelines for the revisions and review so that Metrorail and the WMSC have the opportunity to effectively evaluate and, if necessary, improve the corrective action plans before implementation. Metrorail is developing corrective action plans to address findings and recommendations from the Automatic Train Control and Signals Program audit issued in January. We provide our most recent feedback on these proposals to Metrorail last week. We look forward to receiving Metrorail's revised corrective action plans by next Tuesday. Metrorail has also made progress on its corrective action plan development as required by our January 17th order to address NTSB Safety Recommendation R2328. Metrorail submitted its latest revised CAP proposals on March 13th, and the WMSC provided additional feedback on those 4 CAP proposals on March 27th. Metrorail's revised proposals are due later this month. These corrective action plans lay out the specific steps Metrorail will take and the timelines they will complete these steps in to begin identifying safety critical items and then to develop and implement trend analysis processes to monitor these safety critical items. The caps also include processes to assess whether new items are safety critical. Metro Rail provided corrective action plan proposals on March 29th to address the 2 findings in our train operator certification order issued in February. The WMSC is reviewing these proposals and will respond later this week. After Metro Rail submits acceptable CAP proposals that will address the identified safety deficiency and receives the WMSC's approval, Metro Rail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule set forth in the CAP. Metro Rail submits records of each actionable item in each CAP after each step is completed. Metro Rail's implementation of each of these CAPs improves the safety of the system for riders and workers. During that implementation, the WMSC reviews information to verify progress. This includes reviewing items provided by Metro Rail and other oversight activities. For example, our subject matter experts conduct field inspections to assess progress or to verify safety improvements Metro Rail has said it has implemented. Each CAP is broken up into discrete deliverables, the steps necessary to address the identified safety issue, and the specific deadline that each step will be completed by. Each deliverable encompasses specific action or verification, showing progress in improving safety. For some CAPs, initial steps may occur and Metro Rail may submit evidence to the WMSC within a few months, with separate deliverables later demonstrating that those initial safety improvements are being carried out for several months or quarters so that the CAP can be closed. The WMSC conducts a detailed review of each Metro Rail submission to determine whether it meets the CAP requirements. This review is led by the relevant subject matter experts. When review of deliverables or the WMSC's verification inspections determine that additional information or action is required, the WMSC follows up with Metro Rail. This can include requiring additional supporting evidence, declining a Metro Rail request for closure, requiring a subsequent submittal, or holding meetings to determine other productive paths forward for Metro Rail to effectively implement safety improvements. The WMSC conducts these reviews of Metro Rail's submissions on an ongoing basis. Since the last public meeting, Metro Rail has submitted 28 new deliverables for WMSC review in Metro Rail's regular weekly submissions. Overall, Metro Rail currently has 88 open CAPs that it is in the process of implementing. As I mentioned earlier, the WMSC has closed 7 CAPs since the last public meeting. CAP C0068 addressed a finding from our 2020 Rail Operations Control Center audit that Metro Rail did not have a standardized training program for personnel working as maintenance operations controllers or rail operations information controllers in the Rail Operations Control Center. Metro Rail has developed these training materials. Metro Rail provided the WMSC with the materials and documentation that it had used that training curriculum to train active personnel for their roles. The people in maintenance controller roles deal with reporting and addressing safety issues, such as corrective maintenance that is needed to address a track, signal, or other safety issue. Information controllers deal with station managers, including emergency response, among other tasks. CAP C0144 addressed a finding from the 2021 Revenue Vehicles Programs audit that Metro Rail was not clearly defining the proper use of engineering modification instructions, service bulletins, and other railcar engineering change documents. Metro Rail revised 10 governing procedures to define the use of engineering documents and communicated those revisions to railcar engineering personnel. To demonstrate implementation, Metrorail provided the WMSC with 1 year of compliance checks regarding the improved processes. 5 CAPs closed since the last meeting address findings or recommendations from the Emergency Management and Fire and Life Safety Programs audit. CAP C0165 addressed a finding that Metro Transit Police general orders did not reflect current operational realities and procedures or evaluations from prior events. Transit Police reviewed and updated general orders on their incident command system and retrained personnel. Metrorail also created a work instruction for compiling, sharing, and implementing lessons learned and information from after-action reports and debriefs. CAP C0174 addressed a finding that Metrorail did not consistently inspect and maintain certification status of fire extinguishers. Metrorail created a new documented process for tracking, inspection, testing, and replacement of expired extinguishers. Metrorail communicated the new process and updated the inventory of fire extinguishers with their location, asset number, and status. Metrorail then submitted records showing continued compliance with this new process. CAP C0175 addressed the finding that Metrorail does not consistently perform or document all elements of required fire and intrusion alarm system inspection and preventive maintenance. To address this, Metrorail updated their relevant preventive maintenance instructions, including the frequency of maintenance and responsibilities for each type of equipment. Metrorail then provided 12 months of records demonstrating that it is carrying out that maintenance and testing. CAP C0176 addressed a recommendation to improve and expand training and training coordination in these areas. Metrorail evaluated its existing training, developed new incident management framework training, and provided this training to WMATA personnel and regional first responders. Finally, CAP C0177 addressed a finding that Metro Transit Police personnel, who are part of Metrorail's response to safety events in the Metrorail system, did not have a usable incident checklist for use in emergencies. Metrorail developed an appropriate checklist for this use and updated procedures to include a process to distribute this checklist. Metrorail provided evidence that it provided training on the use of this checklist. Even after a CAP is closed, the WMSC monitors Metrorail's actions on an ongoing basis through our audit, inspection, and other oversight activities. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes?
I have a question, Chair.
Yes, please, Commissioner Rouse.
Yes, thanks. Ms. Rose, that last slide you had up there in terms of the audit and the caps related to it, if you could put that back up real quick. Thank you. Right here. So it seems like most of these C165 through 77 and probably a number maybe before or after are all related to the fire life and safety audit. Do we know that that was issued in 2022? Sorry, 2022. Where are we on the status of the remaining? And do we have a stat for everything related to that audit and anything that remains open?
Sure, I could definitely get you those numbers. We do track the number of caps that are open versus caps that are closed, so I'm happy to provide that information. And we track that information for all audits, so we would have that information handily available as well, separate from the Emergency Management and Fire and Life Safety Program audit.
Yeah, and I don't need to write. I'm just where I'm getting at is it seems like that's one convenient way to kind of categorize what these caps are related to, and I'm trying to, in my own mind, we have a C and a number, right? But how do we know what's related to what and how long some of these things have been opened? I know you and the team know. I'm just wondering, as we grow as an organization, right, and you get more and more of these, how to quickly digest what they're related to. So when you go back and do future audits, or we want to do risk-based inspections, we can see where we've had issues in the past, what types of corrective actions may take longer to implement. I think you mentioned that that's part of your discussion with WMATA is, as you have some of these intermediate submissions, you mentioned the 28 new submissions, those weren't closing out caps, but those are intermediate deliverables, right, to a given cap. There's a lot of moving parts here. And so trying to get a sense of where from 2 years ago, and it may be less than that, depending on when the actual audit was issued, right? Are we where we need to be between both agencies, right? And getting resolution to some of these issues and finding them closed in an appropriate manner, an appropriate time frame that we're looking at. So that's just a question on my end, is try to get how are you organizing these? Do we have them by potential risk, potential or by audits that were performed? Is there a sub way that you typically track these corrective action plans so that in the future we can go back and kind of parse through the data if we need to?
I would say that yes, the answer is yes, by all of the above. Ms. Rhodes and the other members of our CAP team use a tool called Smartsheets to track every aspect of the CAP process and our interaction with Metro. We don't ever let a long period of time go between touch points on any particular CAP, so that we remain engaged and part of inspections planning, and certainly part of audit planning is an internal review of the status of all of the CAPs that may be relevant either to the prior audit that was done on that topic or just in general.
Okay, yeah, and because you can see where I'm getting at it, we've had discussions of where do we go with some of this information, how do we measure ourselves, and it's a collective effort between us and WMATA making sure these things get closed and remedied. Some are easy, right? Some are fairly simple. It's more of documentation, and we'll continue to see those, but you hope that those get resolved fairly quickly, whether it's expired safety gear, like we talked about earlier, or fire extinguishers in this case. But some are much more complicated and have much deeper ties to potential other issues out there. And so trying to figure out where to focus our attention is part of that effort too. And it's, like I said, you're going to get more and more of these over the years as this organization grows. We've been here for several years now, but it only gets more complicated trying to parse through that data. So having a good system in play and trying to know what's been resolved versus what's an ongoing issue or might lead itself to future issues is going to be quite critical moving forward.
Thank you very much for the question. Are there any further questions for Ms. Rhodes from the commissioners? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we will now move on to our next, next agenda item, which is an update on some of the WMSC's latest activities overseeing Metro Rail's safety certification process. Paul Smith, WMSC Director of Systems Engineering, will present this item. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Metro Rail's safety certification process is a critical element of Metro Rail's safety management system. Identifying and understanding failure modes or hazards and proactively mitigating the likelihood and severity of those hazards in a systematic way as documented in Metro Rail's policy and procedures provides for the overall safety of the Metro Rail system. Metro Rail implements its safety certification program, and we, the WMSC, oversee Metro Rail's work through field observations, document and data review, and regular meetings with Metro Rail, as well as by observing the discussions among Metro Rail safety certification committees and working groups. Metro Rail is required to carry out this work for each of its projects that meet its criteria for safety certification. In accordance with our program standard, we designate the specific projects for the WMSC's in-depth review of Metro Rail's safety certification activities. For these projects, Metrorail may not activate the asset or systems into service until the WMSC concurs that Metrorail has conducted its safety certification process, including hazard identification and any mitigations or corrective actions. Projects currently under our in-depth review include Metrorail's new 8000 series rail cars, Metrorail's automated wayside inspection system, and Metrorail's work related to automatic train operation and automatic door operation. We monitor Metrorail safety certification working groups, documentation, and other activities. We have been overseeing Metrorail's work related to automatic train operation and automatic door operation for several years. We have conducted and observed weekly meetings, observed Metrorail field activities, and have been in continuous contact with Metrorail's project team and other personnel. Automatic door operation is separate from automatic train operation, and Metrorail's safety certification work on automatic door operation is specific to that system. It does not include ATO. Metrorail completed the safety certification requirements in December to operate the automatic door open feature of the automatic door operation system on the Red Line. This led to our concurrence with Metrorail's temporary use notice for the use of automatic doors on the Red Line. Our concurrence was required because this project is under our in-depth review. Metrorail completed its safety certification requirements last month to utilize automatic door opening on other lines in passenger service during train operator certification. This led to our concurrence with Metrorail's new temporary use notice governing that activity. The temporary use notice includes safety mitigations required, and Metrorail has not yet begun this certification. When Metrorail does begin the certification on the other lines, the WMSC will observe some of this work as we did on the Red Line. This includes verifying that Metrorail is complying with its identified safety mitigations. Regarding automatic train operation, we provided detailed, timely feedback to Metrorail in mid-January on their draft concept of operations that Metrorail developed for the first time at the end of December. Metrorail developed this concept of operations due to our oversight ensuring that Metrorail begins to follow system engineering standards. Metrorail provided new information and a revised concept of operations just over a month later. We've reviewed that document and provided overall feedback to Metrorail, including necessary clarifications regarding integrity related safety certification work, such as Metrorail's consideration of significantly increasing operating speeds. Metrorail requested additional feedback, which we plan to provide in the coming days. This continues our constructive dialogue. The WMSC's work continues to drive Metrorail to follow a systems engineering practice and its safety certification program plan. It is particularly important to define and control the situations when ATO will be used and when manual operations will be used. Given Metrorail's historical data demonstrating that red signal overruns, station overruns leading to excessive speed and collisions, and other safety events occurred when Metrorail used ATO in the past. The concept of operation serves as the basis for identifying test cases and requirements, and the WMSC has communicated the need for such test cases. Metrorail is working to define the conditions and processes, and we look forward to Metrorail's continued progress. We continue our work on other safety certification oversight. This includes observation of Metrorail's wheel set replacement program and monitoring of ongoing work on automated wayside inspection systems and the 8000 series rail cars. We are also monitoring Metrorail's safety certification of its consideration of increasing operational speeds. The WMSC has communicated the importance of considering this change in the context of Metrorail's ATC block design, vehicle braking rates, and hazards identified based on prior safety events such as the fatal collision at Shady Grove Station in 1996 and other safety events. Thank you, Chair Hart. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Smith?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Loudon.
Mr. Smith, who really decides what systems, what components get safety certification?
I think that that's a decision made by the larger group at WMSC that decides whether a project receives our in-depth review or not.
Well, and I know with our oversight, but I know in the past we've had trouble with Metrorail buying equipment. I think at the time it was a roadway worker or roadway equipment and not going through the safety certification process. Are we satisfied that at this point that Washington Metro is using the safety certification process everywhere where they should be using it? And I know the big stuff, new cars, automatic train operation, those are the high nails. But what about when they buy a new roadway worker, a piece of roadway worker equipment? Are we satisfied that they're appropriately using a safety certification in those cases?
Paul, if I can take this.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sean.
Commissioner Lobby, so your question drives to the heart of how does Metro Rail designate projects that should undergo safety certification? And so Metro Rail has a organization-wide document called the Safety Certification Program Plan, SSCPP. This is the Metro Rail's organizational plan that constitutes all the policies and all the criteria that they use to evaluate a project as its inception stage to determine what level of safety certification, if any, would be applied to it. There are several grades of certifications. There are various flow charts that inform Metro in terms of selecting which projects should undergo safety certifications. There are the much larger dollar value projects that are more recognizable from, say, an FDA standpoint in terms of funding that would definitely undergo safety certification, like this Silver Line project. However, Metro Rail has its own criteria that it uses, and the WMSC, every time Metro Rail revises this program plan, the safety certification program plan for Metro Rail, the WMSC receives that draft program for our own comment and response, so that Metro Rail incorporates aspects of our work to reflect in it. So I hope that answers your question. So there is a very extensive list of criteria that Metro Rail uses through that plan to make assessments and selections on which projects undergo which levels of safety certification. There are many levels of safety certification that a project can receive.
Okay, I understand that. I understand that they have different levels. I also understand that we become very involved in certain, high-profile projects on safety certification. But what I was referring to was in the past, we found evidence that some equipment that was purchased for the roadway workers was not properly safety certified. It should have been safety certified according to Washington Metro's procedures, but was not. And my question is, has that problem gone away? Is Washington Metro now applying safety certification all the areas that their policies say they should?
So the answer to that is I wouldn't posit that the problem has gone away. We do monitor regularly what projects are brought in for safety certification, and then through our other efforts, also keep an eye on what new projects are coming online and raise the question when it is justifiable to raise it as to why it is not undergoing safety certification, or whether that project should garner a higher degree of safety certification than what is being applied to it. So through our other ongoing activities, we do monitor projects that are coming online, and all the other activities that are coming in online to evaluate whether those things should be undergoing safety certification if they are not.
So essentially what you're saying is we're still seeing some issues with that process.
No, I wouldn't say that we are seeing issues, but I don't want to close the door to say there are no issues, because our monitoring is what authenticates whether or not there are issues. Currently, there are none.
Okay, so currently we don't see any issues, but we're continuing to monitor.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby, and thank you, Ms. Samara Singh. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners?
I've got one, Chair.
Yes, please, Commissioner Rouse.
Mr. Smith, or really anybody, I just on this use of temporary use, well, the temporary use notice itself, right? What is the process for using these? Is there a plan for transitioning that into a permanent acceptance? Does that occur once the safety certification requirements have all been met? Or is there a plan to have that in place until a certain time after in observations of the system in use, even after they finish the certification requirements? And do we roll it out per line, or is it just going to be one for the red line, everything else when the system gets certified? Could you enlighten us a little bit about how that's being used in this case? Because I think it's going to be important. You know, automatic door operations is kind of a one step to getting to other technologies later on, especially ATO. So understanding how that tool is being used and the intent there may help us understand further how we roll out other certification requirements as we move forward.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Rouse. So WMATA does have a policy or an SOP on temporary use notices that they follow based upon the temporary activation of a system. Usually the temporary use notices are used when there's still mitigations in place for the safe use of the system. So in this case with auto doors on the red line, there were still safety mitigations in place due to the fact that it's only allowed on the red line. So once they kind of transition to the rest of the system and open that, we indicated, we gave a temporary use notice for operator certification on the other parts of the system. And so once that's completed, then they would transition to basically a COC or a certificate of completion for that project. And then that would be kind of the closeout of the ton. And that's how they would, permanently activate those systems.
And the temporary use notice, is that in perpetuity, or does that have an expiration where it has to be renewed if we haven't completed the certification requirements before a certain date? Where I'm getting at here is I've seen these unfortunately be used and then it never becomes a permanent. It's always temporary, right? Or conditional. And I think part of the goal would be, if you don't want that, you want to go through the steps methodically, get everybody on board, make sure it's working, and then move on with life, right? And so is that a part of these? Is it just a blanket, or do we have to revisit it if it's been a year in the process and it's still a temporary use notice out there?
No, that's correct. There's an expiration date on these temporary use notices, and they do have to be renewed by the committee if they're not completed by the date that they expire. So that's the intent, is that they are temporary and not a permanent fix. So we would expect there to be either a vote to extend them if they don't meet the timeline, or the certificate of completion would be done by that time.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think that's important to keep everybody on the same path to, going through the process.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Rouse. Are there any other questions for Mr. Smith from the commissioner?
Sure. Chair Hart, I have additional questions for Mr. Smith.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby, please.
And I'm sorry, I'm putting the cart before the horse, because I know when we're going to talk about the accident reports, one issue that we're going to talk about is zero speed signal, because I have some questions in that area. But I'm wondering, we talked about safety certification for the automatic door operation. We've talked about safety certification for automatic train operation. One of the concepts, or one of the rules that Washington Metro Rail has, is that doors aren't supposed to be closed until there's a speed signal present. They're not allowed to close the doors when there's a zero speed signal, basically. Is the safety certification of this automatic door operation, does that consider that? Does that prevent the operator from closing the doors when there's a zero speed signal present, or are all these systems stovepiped at this point?
No, as far as the automatic door operation, that is correct. The operators are not to close the doors until the speed commands return. We have observed on some instances where there's been locations where the automatic speed commands don't return, and the operators have either found a workaround for those things and not followed proper procedure. And we brought that to WMATA's attention at those locations where we observed this. But that's, I mean, from a technical standpoint, that's how the system is designed to work. The dwell timer would expire, the speed command should return, and then the operator should close the doors. But that's
But I guess what I'm asking, Mr. Smith, is with all the safety certification we're doing and putting these systems in place, is there any besides the good intentions of the operator, is there any electronic restriction on closing the doors when there's a zero speed signal present? I mean, do those systems talk to each other? Or is everything independent in a stovepipe?
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand your question, Mr. Commissioner Lobby. Is there something that would prevent the operator from closing the door electronically on the train when the speed commands aren't present? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And either through the automatic door operation or automatic train operation or something else.
Yeah, there is nothing that would prevent the operator from operating the doors and closing those doors in that instance without the speed commands.
And if this is Metrorail's rule and their intent, not to close those doors if there's a zero speed signal present or no speed signal present, why aren't they doing that?
Well, I would hesitate to get into the head of an operator that chooses to not follow the proper procedure, but what we've observed from our
and I don't mean the operator, I mean, why, with all these high-tech systems here, why isn't that fairly easy, that if there's no speed signal present, you disable closing the doors? Can't you do that? I mean, why aren't these safety checks put in with these high-tech control systems that they have?
Yeah, currently the system doesn't support that functionality. So that would be an update or an enhancement to the current systems to prevent that from happening without the speed commands returning. So there is no.
But isn't this something that you talk about as part of safety certification? You're supposed to look at hazards. You're supposed to make sure that they're covered. Isn't this something that would logically come up when you're basically approving a safety certification for automatic door operation or automatic train operation to include a feature like that?
If I may add, Mr. Smith, it would also rely on the mode of operation that Metrorail is defining. Currently, their mode of operation is auto open and manual close. At the point at which they change that mode of operation, yes, we too will be looking at it, but presently, Commissioner Lobby, their mode of operation is auto open, manual close, and therefore there is no effort to look into the controls that you are talking about.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Lobby, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, Mr. Smith, I'm not trying to unload on you or anything, but I know in all these accident reports that we've read, we've had so many cases where there's a zero speed signal or no speed signal, and an operator closes the doors, continues from the platform, and runs through a stop signal essentially. And I just thought with adopting automatic door operations and all the discussion there and automatic train operations that this would be an opportunity for Washington Metro to do a simple logic change to make sure that operators can't close the doors unless they have a signal to move forward. This would take care of the door issue, but it would also probably prevent them from running through stop signals once in a while also. So I just thought with your background, you might have a little bit more information on that, but But one of the questions that I'm going to have when we talk about the reports is to better understand what zero speed signals actually means and why operators continually operate their train even though they have a zero speed signal.
Yes, and point well taken. Thank you, Commissioner Lottie.
And I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have another comment you wanted to bring up, Mr. Smith?
No, sir.
Okay. That's all the questions I have on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Are there any other questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Smith? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to safety event investigations. Mr. Dorenzo, I understand you have updates on ongoing investigations and reports to present for our consideration today. We will hear presentations on all of the remaining reports, then consider a single motion on all of the reports collectively. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider as a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on that report. Mr. Dorenzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Following the last public meeting, Metrorail provided a metallurgical report related to the September 2023 derailment near Reagan National Airport Station. This report relates to the bolts and brake discs that detached from a legacy train. A 7000 series train then struck the brake disc that was on the roadway and derailed. The investigation into the February 15th smoke event and evacuation of Eastern Market Station is leading to safety improvements, even as we continue the investigation. Metrorail is reevaluating its emergency ventilation fan playbooks due to the event. Metrorail has committed to sharing the outcomes of its improvements with local fire departments. Separately, Metrorail is also repairing fans at Forest Glen Station. The investigation of the February 15th event is assessing Metrorail's execution of incident management requirements, as well as the underlying collector shoe assembly issue. Metrorail has now developed and distributed to its personnel inspection criteria for the collector shoe assemblies and a procedure to assemble these railcar elements. Metrorail has more closely reviewed its track inspection data since the event, which has identified locations where the third rail required adjustment. This includes areas with conditions such as tight third rail gauge, that is, the third rail being too close to the running rail. The investigation has not determined whether this is related to the collector shoe assembly safety issues. Regardless, Metrorail addressing these defects will improve safety. We are involved in multiple investigative interviews and other activities each week. For example, our interviews and data review related to an investigation into safety event that was initially reported as a rail supervisor improperly attempting to move an object from near the third rail without ensuring that power was de-energized, found that rail traffic controllers improperly directed the rail supervisor to do this, even though the rail supervisor had informed them that there was no hot stick available at this location to verify whether power was de-energized. Hot sticks are insulated tools used to test energization of the third rail. Rail supervisors are required to carry hot sticks. Rail controllers are required to only give permission to do work on the roadway when it is safe to do so. We also required additional reporting and information about an injury in West Falls Church rail yard, based on information we gathered during an unrelated inspection. The interviews have demonstrated that an automatic train control maintenance employee was injured when a switch that they were working on moved unexpectedly. The ATC individual in the yard tower assigned to ensure the switch only moved when directed by field personnel did not know how to utilize the yard control board. We're also investigating red signal over on near Brentwood Rail Yard. This location has a signal on the left side of the train. Most Metrorail signals are on the right side. Metrorail is in the process of implementing a corrective action plan to establish territory familiarization and physical characteristics training and qualifications requirements for operations personnel to address the WMSE finding from our rail operations audit. Other investigations include trains traveling at faster than authorized speeds, which Metrorail is now acting upon, following WMSE oversight, ensuring that Metrorail is aware of and utilizes its data that's available data sources to mitigate safety risk. Moving to the investigation reports before you today, the first report for your consideration today is Investigation Whiskey 0263. This relates to a track worker who was seriously injured during overnight work at the D&G Junction. That is the location east of Stadium Army where the orange line splits from the blue and silver lines. The track and structures crew was on a bridge replacing rails at a switch on October 7th, 2023. The crew lifted a switch point partially onto a catwalk. The roadway worker in charge said that in an attempt to get work done more quickly, they decided to attempt to switch the lifting strap for lifting clamps known as rail tongs when the switch point was partially resting on the catwalk. When one of the workers removed the hook from the strap to put it on the rail tong, the rail slid off the catway onto their left leg. The worker's leg was broken. The work crew used the same crane on the roadway maintenance machine to move the rail off the worker. The roadway worker in charge reported the emergency over the radio. The rail traffic controller consulted with the assistant operations manager, who directed the crew to move the injured employee on the roadway maintenance machine to Stadium Armory Station for quicker medical care. However, at the station, DC Fire and EMS had difficulty finding the injured worker after Metrorail's mission assurance coordinator incorrectly stated the worker was outside the station. There were further challenges to safely removing the worker from the inside of the station due to the elevators being off during overnight hours. The worker was eventually brought to street level via the escalator and taken to the hospital at approximately 5:45 a.m., more than an hour after they were injured. Metrorail reported the serious injury to the WMSC and FTA as required within 2 hours. Metrorail also reported this job-related injury to OSHA as a workplace injury. The WMSC Compact, WMSC Program Standard, and federal regulation require the WMSC to investigate the serious injury, which may also be separately investigated by the FTA or OSHA. After this event, Metro highlighted to its track and structures personnel the importance of being vigilant with the use of heavy machinery, equipment, and tools. Thank you. That completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Dorenzo?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby, please.
Yeah, on this particular accident, this was a serious injury, and Mr. Dorenzo accurately described some of the challenges that the Metrorail crew had to get this injured employee to a place where he could be treated by the emergency responders. And I think it's interesting that all these issues took place, and yet when I look at Metrorail's report, it basically says that emergency responders were able to locate the injured employee on the street level of Stadium Armory Station, and that he was transported to George Washington University Hospital with injuries to their left leg. There's no really discussion about any of the challenges of getting this individual, out of the station. The elevators were off. Apparently, the crews had to get him up to the surface using escalators, and yet none of these issues are really acknowledged in this report. It seems to me that with the challenges that they had in evacuating this injured employee, that they would have also talked about, processes on how to get the elevators back on, or how to basically transport an individual through a closed station more successfully than what happened here. Is there any mention whatsoever in the Metro report about some of these other challenges?
I can jump in real quick. No, Metrorail definitely could consider process or training for employees to use the elevators when the stations are closed. It's not something that was mentioned in the report, though.
Well, I think we come up, we mention a lot of the issues with that have happened, and when I look at the Washington Metro report, they don't seem to cover those issues or close those doors or really react to many of the issues that we're seeing. Does staff have conversations with Metro on these issues that they're finding that Metro's not mentioning?
Yes, I didn't know. Sharmila, I saw you unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
I just wanted to add, Lobby, that yes, Natalie Quiros, John DiRenzo, and Adam Quigley, who head up the investigations team, constantly in communications and discussing these very reports as they are being prepared from day one of a start of an investigation. And so there are, for the areas that you're noting no issues, those are areas as a result of those back and forth conversations on the gaps in information that end up making it into the reports, where the reports are thoroughly described by Metrorail. This is an opportunity. We will definitely make sure that we continue to do that kind of critical review and raise additional questions along the lines of what you're saying. Look at other opportunities where there are maybe further personnel or procedure or policy-wise changes that should be looked at as a result of gaps seen in an investigation, and those things being captured in these reports as well. So thank you for raising that up, but I do want to underscore the fact that these reports undergo extensive review by our investigations team, and I'm sure they'll take the opportunity to do even better as we go forward.
Well, and I guess the bigger question really is once we bring these issues to the attention of Metrorail, are we satisfied with their response? Are we satisfied they're paying attention to those issues and essentially addressing them, mitigating them where possible within their own organization?
Yes, and you mean like as a general question
Yes.
for all of our investigations? Yes.
So what do we know about why the challenges that were faced in this evacuation event were not listed more adequately in the report itself?
I think they were focused that even though there was a miscommunication at first, that the person did receive care and they were able to be transported and it was reported properly. But yeah, there's definitely room for improvement.
I'm just wondering, thinking out loud, wondering whether, given the need for a more comprehensive report, should we send this one back for further attention?
Chair Hart, we can certainly consider that, but I think this is not isolated issue with just this one report. I mean, some of these other reports that we're going to cover today, including the next one, do seem to simplify all the issues. I think it's more a comprehensive issue that we have with Washington Metro's report versus the things that our staff is finding. And I just get concerned that the good things that we do find that can help the situation, or things, doors that need to be closed to have a complete investigation, sometimes Metrorail's not following all of them. So I think it's not one particular report. I think it's in general. I think we should probably expect a better response or a more comprehensive report from Washington Metrorail.
Well, that's kind of my point, is that I wonder if we don't do something with this report and to make it more complete, will we be encouraging that type of behavior that we're not happy with?
Well, and I guess you can pick one. There's several good examples in here. Pick which ones you want to make the case on. Probably the next one is just as good, if not better.
Well,
All the
before
more
we move
reason
on-
if it happens more than once, that's all the more reason to try to do something about it.
And Chair Hart, I see Commissioner Fordyke has her hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I was going to mention, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Lobby. I was going to say that when we find that there are several items that are missing from a report, do we at least give WMATA the opportunity to amend their report so that we have thorough documentation? Meaning they will probably act on it afterwards, but it gives them the opportunity to at least acknowledge that there are things that are missing from their report, and they are given the opportunity to amend their report to include those other items, because it's a training tool also, and they should not leave out certain things that are not privy to the rest of their employees, as well as the supervisors, so that everybody is aware, not for us just coming out to point it out to them, but give them the opportunity to update their report, because they also reflect and understand that they might have had some missing things that are key to what goes into a report.
Each report that you see that we ask you to adopt has been through that kind of a review process at the staff's level, and changes have been incorporated. That doesn't mean that either we or Metro has got it perfectly correct as the result of that process, but this is very much an iterative process, and I appreciate what you said about it being a learning process, because certainly the reports are improved in that process, and we can certainly ensure that in the future that the process is used all the more to bake them even all that more.
Chair Hart and Mr. Meyer, this is more of a procedural question, but are we approving Metro Rail's report, or are we approving the WMSC's report when we vote on these actions?
From my view, the words that we write in the cover page that is attached to the report are both being presented to you, the commissioners, for your adoption of it. So in a sense, the answer is yes, you're doing both.
Both, okay.
Or at least we're asking you to do both. The choice is yours, obviously.
I think that makes the point of Chair Hart and Commissioner Lobby more relevant, because I had been considering these as approval of the commission's work rather than any other supporting documentation that might accompany that.
I'm not sure we're doing anybody any favors by not incorporating the full story in the report that is going to be read by the public and acted upon by all of us.
So I'll make a suggestion to follow on from Chair Hart's introduction to this section. It is a review of each of the reports, but of course, through the voting process, any of those reports can be pulled out of the grouping if you would like any of them or all of them to have different attention. So to Vice Chair Lobby's point, perhaps it's best to continue through the group so that everybody has kind of heard the same briefing about them. And then we can perhaps revisit any concerns that you want to raise at that point.
I think that would help provide more context for us to make a reasonable decision. So let's proceed on that basis. So having said that, any more questions for Mr. Dorenzo? Because if not, I'll move on to the next report, which would be Ms. Quiroz.
I do. I have two quick ones.
Yes, please.
Just real quick on this, to put a button up on this discussion here. In our report, we have our staff observations. Are those reported to WMATA? I mean, do they get a chance to understand some of the things that we've seen and maybe contributing factors? Because obviously there's findings in WMATA's report, and then there's a probable cause. And it's probably worth a discussion with them just how they report and treat things like contributing factors versus probable cause, because you don't want to muddy the water too much But certainly some of these observations, if we're seeing things that we think should be in the report, is there an opportunity for them to know that before they come to us and then we say, this doesn't have this information, and send it back? Is there a means for doing that? Or are we missing a link there because they don't have that opportunity to see some of the things we're considering important?
So we, I think Sharmila mentioned how we are involved in the investigation from day one. There's a preliminary report that comes out, and we are able to see the prelim. We can comment on that, and then for the draft final, everybody's able, well, not everybody, but we have a group in the WMSC that reads the draft finals, and we all provide comments, and that's part of our process. And when we provide those comments, we send them back to WMATA, and for the most part, they address most of our concerns and comments before we get the final back and before it's presented here at the public meeting.
Okay, I guess I think that's important, because to Commissioner Lobby's point here, if we feel like there's an issue here, and as it was just described, if we're approving in effect both reports, our staff's report and then also WMATA's report, we'll want to make sure that opportunity has been there to correct it, because otherwise, just to be fair, they may not know that we saw something that we thought should have been included in a way or not. And I'm not saying it is or isn't. It's just I want to understand that process, because I think if we're going to take a look at how we process these, and I agree, right? You don't want to leave out something that's relevant information, or might be important as a data trend, especially moving forward, particularly in contributing factors, although we can get in a whole nother discussion about how far you go down the rabbit hole. But there should at least be some paperwork that they have the opportunity to address it before we send it back, and it's in a public forum like this. So that's just my thought on that. I do have my question was on the metallurgical report for the brake disc bolts or studs. Was there any conclusion from that? Do we know yet, or is it still too premature? Did the properties come out as expected, or is it just we're still processing?
They did not find any defects in the hardware. They discussed insufficient clamping loads that were put on initially. So I'm not sure if they're talking about the bolts weren't torqued properly, but they said the initial clamping wasn't sufficient, and then allowed the screw to loosen during subsequent service, and then it caused them to shear off.
Okay, and that report itself is still ongoing, though. So
Yes,
we'll see more on that. Okay, thank you.
I'm just looking for a way that we can help ensure that at a high level, this process ultimately results in maximizing the likelihood that we can prevent this from happening again.
you referring to the brake discs?
I'm stating this at a very high level. The idea is to prevent recurrences of things that went wrong. And that's where I'm headed. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that, the most efficient and effective way to do that.
And that, I think, is the recommended corrective actions program that revolves around the investigation's core function. And I don't know if Ms. Samara Singha or Ms. Quiroz would want to make any comments on the RCAs.
And those recommended, so Chair Hart, aside from the corrective actions that you just heard Mr. Rhodes talking about, which are corrective actions that we monitor, which emerge from our findings, these investigations that come forward for your adoption, also based on probable cause and contributing factors, are looked at, and recommended corrective actions are born out of those investigations, which Metrorail then assigns to the various departments who had responsibility or had responsible parties in the causation of a given event. Those recommended corrective actions are monitored by our investigations team because those recommended corrective actions have defined timelines and deadlines for work to be completed, for policies to be updated, for training to be completed, if those are the things that are arising out of an investigation that indicates that there is this gap that needs to be addressed. And so if your question is about contributory factors and probable cause, whether or not those things are addressed, there is a volume of work that happens continuously in ensuring that recommended corrective actions are undertaken and completed by the various WMATA Metro Rail departments. But I sense that your question is largely towards the completeness of these reports, if I understand your bigger picture question that you just raised now.
Correct.
Okay, if I may make a suggestion to the commissioners, we completely understand what y'all are noting in this one area that this particular report has a gap in. And as I mentioned, the investigations team and the entire WMSC staff here have taken note, and we will do a further thorough job in making sure that we review these reports to make sure that there are no gaps like that in the future. And so I would represent that this is an opportunity for us to improve the way that we review the reports so that you all don't detect these gaps, but also appealing for you all to consider if that is in the charts to adopt this report.
I'm happy to defer to the wishes of staff who's much more deeply engaged in this process than I am, and can, I'm sure you can see the holes as well as I can. So to the extent the holes are identified and something is done about them, I'm good to go. But I just want to make sure that we don't leave out important information that would help prevent recurrences.
Chair Hart, I think this is an important issue. And I think that we should probably review the rest of the reports because there's a few more examples here, and then maybe before we vote on all of the reports together, have another short discussion on where we need to go. But you're a professional accident investigator. All of the NTSB people that now work with WMSC understand that process, but I've always felt that all the doors need to be closed on any accident investigation. If a door's open, there's got to be something to close that door. And I see that WMSC staff is identifying those open doors, but I don't see Washington Metro always closing all of them. And so if we could talk about the remaining reports here, maybe we can have a short discussion on what's the best way forward to make sure that all those doors get closed.
Well, I'm happy to do that. That's a good idea. And that way we have a broader context for the total picture. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, in that case, Ms. Quiroz, would you please present the next reports?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. Investigations Whiskey 0264 and Whiskey 0265 relate to separate events that occurred at Foggy Bottom GW Station last year. Investigation Whiskey 0264 relates to improper roadway worker protection on January 16th. A structure supervisor was functioning as the roadway worker in charge. The supervisor entered the roadway without protection and without following all required steps of Metrorail's third rail electrical safety process. Metrorail's third rail process power procedures require communication among the roadway worker in charge, power desk, and rail traffic controllers to provide levels of verification that third rail power is being safely energized and de-energized. The communication during this event, including when the roadway worker in charge spoke with the power desk controller to initiate the third rail power outage request, did not comply with the process. The supervisor entered the roadway without the necessary communication with and permission from the rail traffic controller. The rail traffic controller had properly instructed the supervisor to remain clear. Later, the supervisor communicated only with the power desk controller regarding a power outage that was required for their work area. The power desk controller stated the supervisor could commence hot sticking activities. The supervisor then entered the roadway when there was other rail vehicle movement in the area. The rail traffic controller identified that the roadway worker in charge had entered the roadway without permission or protection when the roadway worker in charge reported to the controller that the power desk had given them the red tag outage identification number. That occurs only after verifying in the field that power has been de-energized. After the rail traffic controller properly identified the safety issue, they informed the roadway worker in charge to remain clear of the roadway and subsequently directed the roadway worker in charge to turn in the red tag. The rail traffic controller again instructed the crew at 1:57 a.m. and 2:17 a.m. to remain clear of the roadway. However, when the power desk controller asked the roadway worker in charge whether all equipment and personnel were clear of the roadway worker in charge said at 2:22 a.m. that personnel were not clear. At 2:31 a.m., the roadway worker in charge turned in the red tag to the power desk controller. Investigative interviews further identified that the work crew had not completed their roadway job safety briefing as required prior to requesting access to the roadway. The investigation also identified inconsistencies in how the process is explained within Metrorail's SOP2 to ensure that protection is in place for different types of power de-energization. Metrorail did not conduct the post-event drug and alcohol testing for this safety event as required by its procedures for those who may have contributed to the event. Neither the roadway worker in charge nor the power desk controller were removed from service. As mentioned earlier, the WMSC is working on an audit that includes Metrorail's Fitness for Duty programs. Following this safety event, Metrorail issued a safety bulletin regarding roadway access authorization and the associated authorities of power desk controllers and rail traffic controllers. Metrorail is updating SOP2 to standardize the language for supervisory and red tag third rail power outages. Metrorail is updating the general orders and track right system, or GOTRS, steps used to validate the process to match the revised SOP2 language. Investigation Whiskey 0265 relates to an evacuation for life safety reasons of Foggy Bottom GWU station on October 5th, 2023. The station manager identified and reported smoke in the station at 10:31 p.m. Metrorail requested DC Fire and EMS response at 10:36 p.m., but did not initially evacuate the station. Metrorail continued to have trains operate through the area. The station manager was directed by a Rail Operations Information Center information controller to investigate whether there was a fire. The radio rail traffic controller requested the train operator of train 905 at Foggy Bottom Station to inspect for anything unusual between Foggy Bottom and Farragut West stations. The train made that movement in passenger service. Metrorail rules do not permit inspections with passengers on board. The radio rail traffic controller instructed the train operator of train 616 to offload all passengers at Foggy Bottom Station and conduct an inspection to Roslyn Station. The fan desk activated ventilation fans at Foggy Bottom Station. At 10:49 p.m., 18 minutes after the station manager reported smoke, passengers began to be evacuated from the station at the direction of DC Fire and EMS. The station manager, Metro Transit Police Department, and personnel in the Rail Operations Control Center did not effectively communicate the conditions or the directions from the incident command to ensure effective shared situational awareness and coordinated action. Even after the station was evacuated, based on observations of heavy smoke by personnel on scene and the direction of the fire department, personnel in the Rail Operations Control Center stated that trains would continue to service the station. At 10:55 p.m., the radio rail traffic controller instructed other train operators approaching Foggy Bottom to turn off their trains' environmental systems. At approximately 11 p.m., DC Fire and EMS identified that debris outside the station near a vent shaft was smoking, leading to that smoke entering the station. DC Fire and EMS then cleared the station for service. The station returned to normal service by approximately 11:22 p.m. Metrorail did not effectively establish incident command or communicate according to its incident management requirements. Metrorail is in the process of implementing CAP C0162, addressing the finding that Metrorail does not consistently follow the incident command system structure, has procedures that do not comply, and has insufficient training to prepare personnel, which had contributed to ineffective and improper emergency response. Metrorail implemented changes to its emergency management procedures last year and began training of personnel. The final completion date for this CAP is scheduled for January 2025. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I've got questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Starting with the W0264, the improper roadway worker protection. You know, this is a very confusing accident. There's a role that the rail traffic controller took. There's the role of the power desk controller, and then there's the roadway worker in charge. And, you know, in looking at this, I'm trying to determine, you know, what should have happened.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I didn't, go ahead if you had more questions. I was going to start, but go ahead.
Well, okay, so we have these guys. I'd like to know, first of all, what should have happened, and secondly, if a roadway worker in charge gets a radio message from someone that says they're supposed to go down and hot stick, you know, what are they supposed to tell the power desk controller? Are they supposed to tell them, hey, that you don't have authority to tell me that? I mean, it's a complete mess when you're using radios to provide permission. You have different people on the radio. How does the roadway worker in charge even know who he's talking to? Does he know that he's talking to the power desk? Does he know he's talking to a rail traffic controller? And when he's told to do something, is he supposed to determine whether that individual had the authority to tell him to do that? I mean, it's a hot mess, really, when you go through that. So, Natalie, why don't you go and try to sort some of this stuff out?
Okay. So when this accident happened, January of last year, it was just a couple months after the new SOP2 began. So before this, it was a completely different process. The way that the roadway workers in charge would contact the rail traffic controller for their power outage, and the roles between the rail traffic controller and the power desk changed. So everything was going well. All the steps were followed in this particular accident until the power desk controller, and a lot of it happens on the phone. I'll add that too. So there's phone calls being made. So the power desk controller called this roadway worker in charge on the phone. And according to the SOP, this controller read what it says in the SOP, which is giving them the authority to commence hot stick activities. When they say commence hot stick activities, the RIC is supposed to then contact the rail traffic controller for permission to enter the roadway. So that's why when you see for the probable cause of what they want to do is kind of clarify that language in the SOP, that although the power desk controller should be telling that the roadway worker in charge that their work area is de-energized, and the next step would be for them to contact the rail traffic controller for permission to enter the roadway to hot stick. So in the report, it's included the SOP of a red tag outage versus a supervisory outage. And the way that they write it in the supervisory outage is a little more clear, where they say, tell the roadway worker in charge to contact the rail traffic controller for permission to enter the roadway. And for some reason in the red tag outage SOP, they write that the power desk controller tells the roadway worker in charge, now you can commence hot sticking activities. And it's not until the next step where it says the roadway worker in charge is supposed to contact the RTC to get permission to enter the roadway. So it was, number one, it was a new procedure. So I think people were, they even mentioned in the investigation that they didn't maybe have enough training leading up to the implementation of the new procedure. So people were still a little confused. And also the language was unclear, the way that it was written in the SOP. So those are the first 2 points, and then I can pause for more questions.
Well, thank you. That does clear up a few things. And I know Mr. Rouse had some questions, but I also wanted to point out here, you know, with the theme of the summary of the Washington Metro investigation basically says the probable cause for this improper roadway worker protection event was a failure to follow established procedures by the roadway worker in charge. And then it also says contributing was some miscommunication between the power desk controller and the roadway worker in charge. Okay. But when you look at this report and what staff came up with, the crew did not do a roadway job safety briefing. There was some references to bad training. There was no tox test. Nobody was removed from service. So these are all other issues that basically are just glossed over in the Metro report. On top of that, between, you know, this is a January, let's see, January 16th, 2023 accident or incident. And, you know, this is over a year later. And I guess the cap is not scheduled to be completed until January of next year. So this is 2 years. This is an issue. This is 2 years, you know, trying to clean it up. And in the meantime, I don't see an acknowledgement by Metro to close these other doors that are there.
Yeah.
And with that, you know, that's basically my take on it. Devin, did you have some questions on this?
I did, if the group would indulge me real quick, adding to that, because and you pointed out the contributing factors are there in the probable cause, and it's like, well, which is that part of the probable? Where are we with that? Because, and thank you, Natalie, for the context, because I think that's helpful too, understanding that this is a new procedure. That's critical. But is the procedure good? Is it not good? Where do we end up there? To Commissioner Lobby's point, there seems to be a lot of confusion just reading the report, much less what the employees were doing at the time. So one particular question I had was in relation to, you know, what really was driving here was especially as it relates to the incident where the rail traffic controller, I'm going to get all these acronyms wrong because there's 1,000 acronyms in this report.
It's okay.
But the rail traffic controller gave them permission or told them not to be out there. They were out there. How did that happen? Right? What was the situation at play there? To Commissioner Lobby's point, the phone call helps clear that up, because I was, who are they talking to on the radio? Do they know who they have permission from? Do they not? But the phone call also raises its own questions, because I don't think phone calls are recorded, whereas most of the time radio communications are. And I don't know if all radio communications are tracked and recorded so that you can go back and see what permissions they had. What is the process, right? Is normally when you get permission to do something, there is either a code that's issued or a timestamp that has to be repeated. Was that part of this process? Did the power desk controller say, you have permission, red tag, here's timestamp, if nothing else, give them a timestamp to repeat back and write down? And was that information, does that get related to the rail traffic controller so that there's checks and balances to say, yep, that person had permission, this is the time that they had permission, or this is the code that they were given to do that work. Now I can give them access to the line once it's clear. It's just, there's a lot going on here, and it's really hard to dig to what were the root causes of this. Was it the procedure itself? Is the revised procedure good, or does that need to be fixed? And we're a year out now. So all that being said, in relation to this particular incident, do we know where they stand? Has there been any further maturity on what the core issues were here? Was it the procedure itself?
Yeah.
Has the communication chain changed?
Okay, so I will agree it is a very complicated process, the power de-energization process. And the only reason I probably understand it so well is because I did it for a few years, every single night on the overnight. So I will say in May of 2022, we issued a power desk order to WMATA, and this order has right now 16 action items, and most of those action items are complete. And we're actually, coming down to these final couple action items. So a lot of these kind of hiccups that happened in this accident have been addressed and resolved through that order, and also even sooner than the other cap that was mentioned that won't close until next year of 2025, that we have estimated completion dates coming up soon for these other action items related to the power desk specifically. The phone lines in the power desk, the rail traffic controller, those are all recorded lines. So that is part of the process to use phones in the power process. So that was approved. In this particular accident, when they did ask the roadway worker in charge if they were clear and ready to turn in their red tag, what we believe happened is that when they went out, initially went to the roadway without permission, they had set up their WASADs and set up their equipment. So when they were told to clear, they did get their personnel clear of the roadway. It wasn't that they were just blatantly out on the roadway working, but then when they asked, is all your equipment picked up from the roadway, the roadway worker in charge had to say, no, I need to go get my stuff that I placed out there earlier. And that's why he had to go out, get his stuff, and then turn in the red tag. And yes, there's a red tag number, and also through Goders, which is they use it on the computer, and the rail traffic controller and the power desk have a kind of back and forth with Goders. So the rail traffic controller can't proceed to the next step until the power desk controller does their step, and back and forth. So that's part of the recommended corrective action with this as well, is that there will be another way to know, for the power desk controller to know if their roadway worker in charge has permission to hot stick or not, because the rail traffic controller will have another basically check on their Goders that they will be able to see to say, yes, they were given permission to enter the roadway. So these kind of things where there was kind of this gap in sharing information, it won't happen in the future.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just, because again, there's part of the problem here is that there's parallel issues too. It's not, I think it's not just one sole issue, but I guess if I get to why were they on the track? Did they have permission to be? Do we know, is that just purely confusion, or did they not know what they were supposed to be doing, or did they deliberately go out and try to get their work done, even though they weren't given permission from the RTC to be out there?
Right. So in this accident, they went and hot sticked because they were told to from the power desk controller. And I think there was a confusion of who was supposed to give that permission. It was supposed to be given from the rail traffic controller, not the power desk. So that was the first part. And the second part is part of the way that the language is written in the SOP is it was written to say, for the power desk controller to tell them you can commence hot sticking activities, but it's just kind of this other part of you can commence this activities once you get permission from rail traffic controller to enter the roadway. So I don't think that it was intentional, for them to break this procedure.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was trying to dig to, because there's different issues if that's the case, right? If a
Sure.
deliberate act versus just process got me type situation, and the safety and how you handle and mitigate those things are completely different, right? So that's helpful. Thank you for laying that out for us.
So with that discussion, let me suggest that we continue with the completing these reports and then look at the totality of it and see what's the best course of action. Is that any sense of wanting to pursue that route? Okay, having said that, Mr. Dorenzo, would you please present the next report?
Can I ask a question on the second report that was presented?
Yes,
Chair
please.
Hart?
Yes, please, Commissioner Lau.
This is the evacuation for life safety reasons. This is another interesting accident. The station manager reported smoke at 10:31. And he was told to investigate whether there was a fire. And I would assume if he was the station manager, he knows what smoke looks like. But it was not till 10:49, 18 minutes later, that the station was evacuated. And then it wasn't until 10:55, another six minutes later, that the rail traffic controller instructed train operators to turn off their environmental systems. And as part of this, apparently the rail traffic controller told one of the train operators of train 905 to inspect to see if there was a fire. And again, this is a train with passengers on board, and Metro Rail rules do not permit inspections with passengers on board. So we go through all this and some of the issues of this accident. It took a long time for them to close the station, that's for sure. They inspected the track with a passenger train. And then when I look at Metro's report here, the probable cause of this event was smoke debris outside Foggy Bottom Station near a vent shaft. Smoke entered the station through the vent shaft. The station was evacuated until the source was identified. And really no discussion whatsoever of the other issues regarding, how long it took to close the station, inspecting for a fire using a occupied passenger train, none of that. So I just wanted to put that on the record also. That's kind of the frustration I have between what staff's finding and what Metro Rail's reaction is. Thank you, Chair Hart.
Sure. So if you're good to go, let's go to the next report for Mr. Dorenzo, and then we can look at the totality and see what to do from there.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigations Whiskey 0266 and Whiskey 0267 relate to derailments last year related to improper vehicle movement in long-term work zones. In these extended shutdown areas, Metro Rail designates a mobile command center as the roto worker in charge. Mobile command center personnel are not at the location of the work zone. Crew leaders are on site. Investigation Whiskey 0266 relates to the derailment of a roadway maintenance machine near East Falls Church Station on June 4th, 2023. A flat car being pushed by prime mover derailed a section of cut running rail. No one was hurt. The event was not reported to personnel in the Rail Operations Control Center in a timely manner as required by Metro Rail procedures. The equipment operator had moved the consist from East Falls Church platform to a work area. They then returned to the platform at the direction of a track construction supervisor to retrieve additional tools for the work. When the vehicle was at the platform, workers removed track clips and cut out a section of the left running rail. This information was not communicated to personnel aboard the prime mover or coordinated with the track supervisor. Further, there was no visual warning or marking on the rail to alert the operator that the section of track had been cut, and no watchman lookout had been assigned to protect the work crew on that track. The front wheel set of flat car F538 derailed. The vehicle traveled approximately 25 feet after it derailed. Approximately 24 minutes after the derailment, Mobile Command reported the event to the Maintenance Operations Center and the Rail Operations Control Center. Flat car F358 was later re-railed by the Office of Car Track Equipment Maintenance personnel. The equipment operator and flagman were removed from service and taken for post-event drug and alcohol testing. The WMSC is assessing Metro Rail's Mobile Command procedures and practices in an audit of roadway wayside worker protection. This includes supervision, monitoring, and continuous improvement opportunities. The draft report of this audit is being finalized. Following this event, Metrorail issued a critical reminder to personnel of safety rules and procedures to prevent roadway safety incidents. Metrorail recommended to the crew leader that any movement of a vehicle towards sections of cut rails have a flagger at the location to flag vehicles to stop. Metro also reiterated the need for shunt lights, flares, orange cones, watchmen, or physical barriers to negate entry into a work area where derailments can occur. WMATA implemented a requirement that all rail movements be communicated on a designated radio operations channel. Investigation Whiskey 0267 relates to a derailment near Greenbelt Station on August 11th, 2023, during a separate extended shutdown. The crew of a roadway maintenance machine consist operated over a switch that was not aligned for the intended direction of travel. This resulted in a derailment of ballast car B406, which was at the leading end of the consist. The derailment occurred at 12:30 a.m. A track and structures equipment operator on Prime Mover 481 was operating the consist with a flag person at the front of B409, properly positioned near the emergency brake. As the consist moved through the interlocking, it first traveled over a properly aligned switch and then reached the switch that was not aligned for this vehicle. The derailment caused significant wayside damage to the third rail, switch point, and automatic train control equipment such as D-loop and cabling. At the time of the derailment, third power was already de-energized due to ongoing work. This movement was one of several through the interlocking for this and other rail vehicles. The movement was being controlled and directed by a track supervisor who was serving as a gang lead or as a crew leader. The supervisor was standing near switch 1A at the Greenbelt Station interlocking and was clamping switches to align with various intended movements. In an interview, the supervisor stated that they assumed this duty due to not having dedicated personnel available. Equipment operators or flag persons, depending on the direction of travel, are also responsible for ensuring correct rail alignments for the intended move. This crew had safely crossed from track 1 to track 2 to allow another vehicle to pass, then returned to track 1 to resume dropping ballast. After the crew dropped the ballast, the crew leader instructed them to return to Greenbelt Yard to pick up more ballast for the work. Ballast is the rock that is placed underneath rail ties. Switch 1A, the first switch the consist encountered, was clamped in the normal straight-through position, which was the intended movement. CCTV shows the crew leader had checked that switch for proper alignment. However, switch 3A was clamped in the reverse, which was a diverging direction. The flat car derailed. An investigation interview, the flag person said that they had been looking farther ahead on the roadway for the barriers marking the end of the work area that were several hundred feet beyond the switch location and had not noticed the position of the switches or any clamps near switch 3A. The flag person stated that they made a mistake by not stopping the vehicle to verify that if the switch was aligned as intended. Based on post-event statements, the flag person did not immediately inform the equipment operator of the derailment. The equipment operator secured the prime mover and walked to the front of the consist, where they identified the derailment and subsequently informed the crew leader. Approximately 10 minutes after the derailment occurred, the crew leader stated they contacted Mobile Command, which Metrorail assigns as the roadway worker in charge for extended shutdown areas. Mobile Command reported the event to the ROCC at 12:54 a.m. Metrorail distributed a safety bulletin related to this and other safety events. Metrorail provided additional training to the flag person. That completes this report.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Are there any questions from the commissioners? And then after that, let's engage in the discussion about how to handle these as a group, not because necessarily they're substantively related, but because we're seeing a lot of process issues that need to be addressed. And we need to figure out a more efficient and effective way to do that. So any questions for Mr. Dorenzo regarding this one, and then discussion on the totality?
I have a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby, I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
Yeah, I know you would be, but I just want to make first an observation that this is another issue where we have a flag man who stated, the flagman stated they alerted the prime mover operator to stop over the radio, but the radio did not transmit. I think the last meeting we had the case of a flagman that didn't have a radio or didn't have a working radio. So this seems to be a common theme. On the second accident at Greenbelt Station, they talk about talk around channels. And I wanted to find out if staff could tell me how many talk around channels do they have? And it also says that Metrorail does not record its talk around channels. How many channels do they have, and why don't they record them?
I am not sure on that one. I'm not sure if Natalie or anybody else has any more information on that.
Yeah, I don't know the number of talk around channels, but I know they use it just to cut down on the radio traffic on the regular ops.
Well, it would seem to me, provided they don't have 1,000, talk around channels, that it would make sense to record these talk around channels, especially if they're going to use them normally to do different functions and try to stay out of the way of the normal operations channels. But it wouldn't seem to me, it wouldn't seem like a great burden to go ahead and record those channels also. That's all I have on this one. Thank you, Chair Hart.
Any further questions from any of the other commissioners regarding this one? Okay, so where are we here? How many do we still have some? I think
Yeah,
we still have from.
We have a couple more.
Okay, that's what I thought. Let's go through and finish those, and then we can come back and look at the totality. Ms.
Okay.
Keewer?
Thank you, Chair Hart.
Sure.
Investigation Whiskey 0268 and Whiskey 0269 relate to improper rail vehicle movement and associated red signal overrun. Investigation Whiskey 0268 relates to improper rail vehicle movement from Federal Triangle Station on January 6, 2023. A rail traffic controller attempted to contact the train operator of train 452 approaching Federal Triangle Station, but did not receive a response. The rail traffic controller planned to direct the train operator to hold at Federal Triangle Station due to delays elsewhere on the line. The rail traffic controllers then utilized a turn back feature in Metrorail's signaling system that can prevent trains from receiving speed commands, the indications of the maximum allowable speed. However, the train operator then moved the train toward Metro Center despite the train showing a 0 speed command. Metrorail only permits moving a train with 0 speed commands after receiving permission and a protective block from the rail traffic controller. This is because a 0 speed command can indicate that there is another train or work crew directly ahead or switch not aligned for safe route. The rail traffic controllers detected this apparent improper movement and communicated with the train operator at 11:02 a.m. The train operator reported to the rail traffic controller that the train had not lost speed commands. A rail supervisor boarded the train at Roslyn Station and spoke to the train operator. Metrorail removed the train operator from service for post-event testing at 1:09 p.m. and removed the train from service for event downloads at 1:56 p.m. Metrorail personnel stated they were gathering additional information during that time. The vehicle data shows the train did show 0 speed commands and that the train operator, contrary to Metrorail rules and procedures, closed the train doors when the train had 0 speed commands. The train operator then activated stop and proceed mode to bypass the 0 speed commands without required permission from the rail traffic controller. The train operator entered the acknowledgement code twice that the system requires to move with 0 speed commands. Stop and proceed mode permits movement at up to 15 miles per hour with 0 speed commands. The Metrorail requires this mode to be used only in those situations where movement with 0 speed commands is permitted by a control point, such as a rail traffic controller and a protective block had been established. That allows safe movement from and through areas with 0 speed commands. The train operator improperly moved the train to Metro Center Station, passing the turnback location at 13 miles per hour. After passing the turnback, the regulated speed changed to 29 miles per hour, and the train operator increased speed as the train moved toward Metro Center Station. The WMSC commends the rail traffic controllers for identifying this improper movement. Metrorail is in the process of implementing CAP C0181 to address the rail operations audit finding. The elements of Metrorail have a culture that accepts non-compliance with written operational rules, instructions, and manuals. Metrorail is scheduled to complete this CAP in October. Investigation Whiskey 0269 relates to a red signal overrun at Mount Vernon Square Station on July 11th, 2023. This occurred after the train operator had entered stop and proceed mode. The speed commands had dropped to 0 as the train entered the station due to a red signal and train movement ahead. The rail traffic controller provided the train operator with a permissive block to the end of the station platform. This permitted the train operator to enter stop and proceed mode, pull the train up to the end of the platform, and service the station. This was the final stop for this train, as Metrorail now ends all northbound Yellow Line service at Mount Vernon Square. Trains then turn back to Huntington Station, either utilizing the pocket track or interlocking. After the train operator offloaded the train at Mount Vernon Square Station on the northbound track, the train operator closed the train doors. The train still had 0 speed commands, so required the doors to remain open. The train operator then improperly moved the train forward without speed commands. Metrorail stop and proceed mode awareness tool software does not require the train operator to acknowledge movement without speed commands for a second time after cycling the doors. At the time of the improper movement, the switch was aligned for a straight through move, not for the intended movement of this train into the pocket track. The train operator stopped the train after passing the red signal governing the turnout for the pocket track. The front of the train stopped 12 feet beyond the red signal. The rail traffic controller contacted the train operator due to a red signal overrun alarm on the Advanced Information Management System display in the control center. This red signal overrun detection by the signal system automatically led to other signals at the interlocking turning red and the interlocking switching from automatic to manual operation. Metrorail dispatched personnel to the scene who confirmed that the train had not reached the switch point and clamped the switch. The train was moved to a rail yard for inspection and investigation. Following this event, Metrorail directed rail supervisors to highlight to train operators the importance of rules requiring them to verify a proceed signal, correct rail alignment, and speed commands prior to moving a train. Metrorail provided additional training to the train operator related to speed commands and rail alignment. As general information, as we continue to oversee Metrorail's safety certification work related to automatic train operation, Metrorail's automatic train operation would not have prevented or reduced the severity of this event. Based on known safety hazards and risks, Metrorail is planning to require manual mode operation into and out of pocket tracks. Metrorail would also continue to require manual operation utilizing stop and proceed mode to adjust the train on the platform to properly service the station when the train stops short of the end of the station platform with 0 speed commands. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key-Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key-Rose on this report or on either one of these 2 reports?
Not a question, but a comment, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I think we talked about the questions before, but, you know, I'm a mechanical engineer, but I think the electrical engineers could easily, you know, put some logic in either the automatic train operation or the automatic door operation systems that if you have no speed command, that you disable propulsion so you can't move the train and you can't close the doors. To me, that this is a way to take the human element out of this, and you know, there's probably a need to be able to bypass the system. But as Mr. Rouse has explained previously, there are ways to do that safely. But we've had so many issues with trains that proceed without a speed signal, that go through signals and basically put their trains in unsafe situations. I think that's something that should be considered as part of the safety certification processes for these 2 important systems.
Yeah, I would concur with Mr. Lobby's points there. And, you know, moving forward, I think one core question for, you know, especially as we talk about ATO is what functionality, because there's two ways to look at it, right? The idea of using this technology is to reduce human cost or human factor accidents, right? And certainly in situations like this, whenever you have a bypass of that system, it eliminates the ability to mitigate those potential hazards. So the question when we talk about ATO and automatic train control and automatic train protection and where WMATA wants to be with reinstituting that technology on the line, and where we make certain assumptions in terms of how the system operates and how it's safe. I think one important thing that we need to establish with WMATA is how much of this is related to functionality of the existing system and just getting it up and running versus functionality of what the system can do today. And are we both happy with how that's going to play out? You know, because obviously these systems have been around for a very long time. And so that's, to a certain degree, you, without making significant investments and modifications to the system, you may have to live with limitations to what you can do. That's understood. But we're also, again, these systems have been around for a long time, and there are certain functions and methodologies that have been developed to help mitigate these. So even if you have a zero code and you have a procedure to allow the engineers to, or operators to move the train in these situations, there are still things like stop loops that you can put at the end of a signal that can still initiate an emergency stop if they go beyond certain limitations. And so I think that's a discussion we need to at least grasp or understanding we need to have moving forward with WMATA as we start to move into more serious ATO discussions. Is, you know, what are the capabilities of the system versus what our expectations are? And is it just because the investment can't be made there now, or is it just the functionality that system can't do? Or is it something we should be implementing now, 2024, even if it's cab signal ATC based technology? So I don't want to belabor this more. We have a lot more items to get to.
Well, we certainly will have to give some hard thought to what extent will we use the existing way obsolete system versus modifying it based upon a lot of learning since then. So stay tuned on that. I wasn't intending to open a discussion on that as we speak, but stay tuned on that because that's certainly one of the issues that we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't mean to insinuate that the technology is obsolete. You know, you could look at Japan, especially. They've been using these types similar control systems for over 50 years, and they are simple. And if you use them well and correctly, they work very well. And so it's not that it's necessarily obsolete. It's just taking a evolution of that technology and using it appropriately for 2024 versus 1960, right?
Well, that's a good point. I perhaps misused the word obsolete. I should have said design it would be used in a system that's much different than the way it was designed decades ago. So
it's a classic system.
So let me move on to the final two reports to Mr. Dorinzo, and then we can discuss how we want to handle these reports. So Mr. Dorinzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0270 relates to an improper door operation on the Green Line on March 26, 2023. This occurred due to improperly installed door systems. The train involved had stopped in the tunnel between U Street and Columbia Heights stations after speed commands dropping to 0. This was because of a bobbing track circuit ahead. A bobbing track circuit is a track circuit that is intermittently indicating that it is occupied. The train operator could not move the train forward due to the train safety systems recognizing that not all doors were closed and locked in the required position. The train operator communicated with the rail traffic controller, securing the operating cab, and investigated. The train operator identified that doors 9 and 10 on the second car of the train, car 3128, were not fully closed. The opening was estimated to be a few inches. The train operator stated in an investigative interview that riders in the car reported that no one had appeared to exit from the train and that the riders had not noticed the gap between the train doors. The emergency door pull handle had not been activated. The train operator reset the door system, communicated with the rail traffic controller, and moved the train to the Columbia Heights station platform where riders were safely offloaded. The train was taken out of service and moved to a rail yard for further investigation and inspection. The inspection identified that a door limit switch was installed in an incorrect position. A bump stop thread was damaged. A lock and close switch failed and stuck, and both doors at this opening were not centered in the door pocket as required. The improper installation of these door control systems meant that the doors would not properly remain closed. A review of other events showed 5 other reported instances of doors opening with the train moving or not at the platform from January 2022 to April 2023 on 3000 series or 6000 series rail cars. However, 3 of those events resulted in no trouble found by Metrorail. After the 2 remaining events, Metrorail replaced the master controller assembly on the relevant rail car. For this rail car, Metrorail verified in post-event inspection that shunt straps were in place on the master controller as required after a May 2019 event near Dunloring Station, which was investigation Whiskey 0017, when a door was open while a passenger train was in motion. The WMSC has transmitted a draft report of the most recent WMSC audit of Metrorail rail car programs to Metrorail for its 30-day technical review. The WMSC will consider any comments from Metrorail and incorporate them as appropriate and issue a final report. The last safety event investigation report for your consideration today is Whiskey 0271, related to a collision in the Alexandria Rail Yard on July 21, 2023. A roadway maintenance machine, Constance, collided with an employee's personal car at a grade crossing in the yard at approximately 6:03 a.m. At 5:59 a.m., the equipment operator and flagman on prime mover 37 pushing flat car F523 received an absolute block from the interlocking operator for movement back into the rail yard after overnight work activities. The Constance was delayed in returning to the yard due to a brake issue on the flat car that was repaired in the field. This led to the Constance returning to the yard after the start of passenger service and at the time of the shift change for personnel in the yard. Normally, the Constance would have returned approximately 1 hour earlier when there were typically far fewer cars driving over the grade crossing. The equipment operator stopped prior to the grade crossing. Multiple employees were driving personal cars in and out of the rail yard through the highway portion of the grade crossing due to the 6 a.m. shift change. Metrorail rules give all rail vehicles the right of way at yard grade crossing, but the equipment operator stated that they remain stopped due to the car traffic. After the last personal vehicle in the line of cars passed the crossing, the flagman signaled the equipment operator to proceed. As the Constance moved forward, another employee in a personal vehicle drove from a parking lot area toward the crossing, did not stop at the stop sign or pavement markers, then entered the grade crossing. The employee stopped their car in the crossing just before it was struck by the flat car. The employee in the car was transported to the hospital by the Alexandria Fire Department. The front left side of the car was damaged. Following this event, Metrorail issued a safety bulletin on grade crossing safety. Metrorail is also improving signage at its rail yard crossings that reminds drivers to yield to trains and identifies that a horn can indicate rail vehicle movement. Metrorail does not have mainline grade crossings. The WMSC's inspections have followed up on the durability of these improvements. On February 15th, the WMSC identified the stop sign and associated signage at Greenbelt Yard were lying on the ground, apparently having been knocked down. In accordance with the WMSC program standard, the WMSC communicated this hazard to Metrorail to be addressed, along with other items identified during that inspection of the Greenbelt Station, Greenbelt Yard, and of the path employees used between the 2 locations. Thank you. That completes today's investigation report presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Dorenzo on this report or either of these 2 reports? Thank you. Hearing none. Dr. Meyer, I want to turn to you to get your thoughts on, you've heard this conversation about the concern about the quality of some of these reports and the completeness of the information. I just would like to hear your thoughts on how we should handle this series of reports collectively.
Well, I'm not sure that I have coherent thoughts on exactly how to handle the issue. Oh, I didn't realize my video had gone off. I'm not sure that I have coherent thoughts on exactly how the commissioners might want to address or handle, although I know that Ms. Samara Singha has been monitoring and thinking carefully about this. I might punt over to her and ask for any thoughts, and then maybe I'll fill in as needed after she speaks.
Thank you. That'd be very helpful. I think it would be useful for us, for the commissioners, to have a sense of where the staff is on this, because you guys are in the thick of it. So I'd like to defer heavily to you, but I'd like to hear what Ms. Samara Singha has, what her thoughts are.
Thank you, Chair Hart. So I've been, as Dr. Meyer mentioned, I've been listening very carefully and closely to the gaps in these reports that you all have been describing to us over the course of the investigations presentations today. And what I hear is that the staff, along with the safety investigators at Metrorail, need to do a better job in understanding and explaining the logical causation of these events, taking each aspect of the investigation and providing a logical followed through explanation on the causation, and then noting what the non-compliance arose out of, what the gaps were, as Commissioner Lobby pointed out. How should they have done it versus what happened in this instance, clearly stating the discrepancy and following through that in a logical explanation, and then making sure that all the aspects of a given event are fully evaluated. What I hear you all saying is, you all appreciate the work we are doing. You appreciate the scrutiny that we provide to each of these investigative report preparations, but there is more work to be done. And so I would, as I mentioned earlier on, what I've taken down as a homework assignment is for us to think even more critically, for us to be much more scrutinizing in the progression of the work of the reports as they are prepared from day one to the point where we are presenting it to you all, to make sure that all of the aspects of each of the investigations, essentially making sure every stone is turned and explained as to what we found when each stone was turned, is what y'all are looking for. We are very close to being to 100%, but what I hear y'all saying is, at least in these several reports that we presented today, that we could have done better in making sure that the story was told and a much more complete story was told. And then, of course, taking it to the logical conclusion of what are the improvements or recommended corrective actions that need to arise out of each of those investigations. So if that is the homework assignment, and if I have understood that correctly, we will make sure that we do that in that manner going forward, to the degree that you all are asking us to.
That's very helpful, and it raised the question for me whether we need to put the effort into being retroactive in going after these reports, or making prospective fixes only, not sending these back. So let me open it up. Let me open up the floor to that discussion.
Chair Hart, I think that the reports that we've looked at today, I don't think there's a need to look back per se. I think that they're good examples of what we need to do, but I think we need to be forward facing on this and see if we can't do a better job. I mean, you know, one of these reports that we had some issues with is almost 14 months old already. So rather than trying to recreate the past. Maybe we can do a better job in the future. And this Marsh Singer, talked about a lot of different issues. I don't think that any of this is a criticism of the investigation that the WMSC staff is doing. I think they're doing a very good job at identifying the issues. Every once in a while we have something that we don't understand. It's nice to get that cleared up, but I think that they do a very good job of identifying the issues. My major concern is that even though we've identified these issues, I don't always think that Metrorail is paying attention to all those issues and basically taking steps to mitigate those issues. So it's almost like if we had a list of these are all the open issues, and this is what Metrorail is doing to address all of these issues. I think that might even be more helpful, but I think we need a way to get Metrorail on board as far as responding to everything that we're finding, whether it's the long time it takes to close the station, whether it's continued issues with trains operating with zero speed, whether it's continuing issues with doors or maintenance away people not following the procedures. I think we need to connect those dots and have a list of issues and make sure that all those issues are covered somewhere by Metrorail responding to them in a positive way. And that in the future is what, I would like to see some way to do that and make sure that Metrorail has our attention on those important issues that are related to the probable cause.
We have certainly in the past attempted to beef up that section of the cover sheet, though we could be much more explicit about it or even include a table of issues or something similar as you're describing.
Well, what would help me is you do a great job with these cover sheets and identifying those issues, but it's almost like there needs to be a sentence behind it that says, and Metrorail has agreed to do this, or Metrorail has agreed to do that. Just to close those doors. We're finding them, but I don't see the closure on the other side. Now, maybe staff's getting that in meetings and things like that, but it's pretty easy to promise something in a meeting. I'd like to see something in writing that says Metrorail is committed to do this or that, to close out those other various issues. But you're doing a great job identifying them, but somebody over at Metrorail's got to close them on the other side, and we need some kind of record of that.
And there are a great number of programs that are designed to actually be the engine by which we make sure that those actions happen. The investigations, of course, being one tool, CAPS and the recommended CAPS and the other processes, including WMSC orders, are all sort of the round out of that. We can attempt to more explicitly summarize that, I think, in an issues table that we put in these cover sheets.
And let me be quick to add that I'm not considering that what I'm discussing is not, I don't intend it to be criticism. It's not criticism at all. I agree with Commissioner Laube that we're doing a great job of identifying the issue, but how do we make sure, how do we take them to closure and to an acceptable closure? That's the issue before us. Any other commissioners have any thoughts on this process?
I don't know if you want to go by hands.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Higgins should speak yet.
We've had previous discussions about the issue of certification for Metro personnel. One of the things that seems to me, it's one thing to identify, and I agree with everything that's been said about it's one thing to identify the problems. I think we're asking Metro to respond specifically is important, but I also think I would be interested in knowing whether there's any sort of pattern in terms of the reason that we're having these problems. Is it a lack of training? Is it a lack of clarity about what responsibilities are? That doesn't come through to me in terms of the discussion. I am very grateful for all the in-depth review by my colleagues, but I agree that we need to get not just Metro to act, but we should also, I don't know whether we can identify whether there's a pattern going on in terms of why there's this consistent lack of understanding, if for lack of a better term, of among the personnel who are involved in some of these actions.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Did I see another hand up?
Chair Hart, I have some thoughts on
Yes.
this as well.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Conklin.
I think there's a lot of value in having the WMSC's report stand separately from the Metro Rail report. I don't think the WMSC is in a position to usurp Metro's own investigation authority here, and I think it's essential that Metro Rail staff investigate all these issues. I think what Commissioner Lobby was thinking, I think this is what he was thinking, is that there's a difference in the treatment of the issues between the Metro Rail investigation report and the WMSC report, in that it appears that the staff's reports at the commission are highlighting more issues associated with the incidents than perhaps the Metro Rail reports are, which are focused more on a direct causal issue rather than a whole other set of circumstances that either thwarted the response or otherwise contributed to long response times and things like that. So I'm somewhat uncomfortable having our actions be endorsements of the Metro Rail investigative reports. And I've been more focused on the quality of the report and coverage of the issues and the commission staff's assessment. And I frankly have struggled with the great deal of duplication because there's a 80 to 90% overlap between these two investigations, which one would hope there would be that or greater. But it is a challenge to digest both of those things. So I like the idea that you suggested, Mr. Meyer, of incorporating some of those issues in a summary table at the beginning. I think it might be also, and if that is covering where the work of the commission staff has identified issues that were not directly identified in the Metro Rail reports, I think that would be useful. And obviously there is a desire to have the two items converge over time. So that might be a tool to encourage the Metro Rail reports to look at these issues that perhaps are being glossed over in the investigations today because they're not the direct issue associated with the incident. But those were my thoughts on the topic. I, much like Commissioner Lobby, don't think there's value in rejecting any of the reports that we've seen. But I do think there is some work to be done to maybe have the quality of the Metro Rail investigation approach that of the commission. I had briefly thought that there was a concept where you could have a consensus investigative report and then the Metro Safety Commission's work was on the corrective actions, but I'm not sure that's valuable. I think it is more valuable for Metro Rail to continue ownership of a primary investigation of the incident. So that's where I am on it, but happy to have more discussion, although it's 3 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Conklin. Any other thoughts, comments, suggestions from commissioners or staff before we take this to a vote? Well, I think I'm satisfied that the staff has heard and has understood. Commissioner Bob, did you want to comment?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thought I saw your hand. I'm satisfied that our staff understands where we're troubled and has a good idea what to do about it. And I'm willing to count on that for prospectively and not necessarily have to return all of these for further treatment, but that's the direction that I'm headed, is considering them all collectively and then letting the staff apply the concepts that were discussed today in future investigations. So I'm going to ask to see if there's a motion to adopt the investigative reports collectively that have just been presented. That's Whiskey 0263, 0264, 0265, 0266, 0267, 0268, 0269, 0270, and 0271. Is there a second on that motion?
So move.
Okay, Commissioner Laube seconded it. All those in favor, please raise your
Aye.
hand and say aye.
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 Say aye. Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
All right, Chair Hart. We now have the full complement of commissioners. So the vote is 6 yeas to 0 nays. So the motion to adopt these investigation reports is approved as presented.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh, and staff. Take that ball and run with it.
We will indeed. Thank you.
We have full confidence that you will do a masterful job of that. Next item on the agenda, resolutions and other actions. We have 3 procurement-related resolutions for consideration today. Under the WMSC's procurement processes, the commissioners must authorize the CEO to award procurements when the procurement is expected to exceed $50,000. We will consider a single motion encompassing all 3 of the resolutions. If any commissioner wishes to remove a resolution from the group and consider it in a single vote separately, please indicate that at the end of Mr. Ange's comments on that resolution. Mr. Ainge, I'm sorry, I pronounced it incorrectly. Mr. Ainge, would you please summarize these proposed procurements?
Thank you, Chair Hart. First, the WMSC staff has posted a request for quotation for HR generalist services. The contract term is 1 year with 2 one-year options. We expect the cost per year to exceed $50,000. Therefore, a resolution authorizing staff to proceed with the contract once bids are received and evaluated is before you today. Second, the WMSC staff are developing a procurement for IT support services. The cost of these services is also expected to exceed $50,000 per year. Therefore, we are requesting authorization to proceed with this procurement. And finally, we are seeking authorization to proceed with a procurement related to business operations insurance. Based on initial information from our current insurance broker, we expect that this coverage will exceed $50,000 per year. These are the 3 resolutions before you today, Chair Hart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ainge. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Is there a motion to adopt these 3 resolutions?
I'll move.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rouse. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar-Dyke. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
So Chair Hart, again, all 6 commissioners voted to adopt these resolutions as presented. So therefore, resolution 2024-1, 2, and 3 are adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Is there any other business that the commissioners would like to address today? Hearing none, that completes our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels, or by email. I would like to thank Dr. Meyer and his staff for all of their hard work to continuously improve the safety of Metrorail, and I would like to thank them for their presentations for this meeting. I would also like to thank the commissioners for being so thoroughly and completely engaged in this process to make it better for all of us and in this meeting in particular. Finally, I would like to thank the members of the public who attended this meeting. We appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. We expect to hold our next public meeting on May 14th, 2024. Hearing no further business, this meeting is hereby adjourned.